Welcome to Podcasting for Business Owners. I'm your host, Laura McRae, a podcast consultant, educator, and self-confessed podcast nerd. If you're thinking of launching a podcast or want to grow the one you have, you're in the right place. Hold on to your headphones and let's go. Welcome back to Podcasting for Business Owners, the podcast that helps you share your story, lead your industry, and grow your network through podcasting. I'm Laura, and today we're joined by Kara Stokes, a copywriter and conversion coach with a unique talent for helping business owners stand out through impactful messaging. In this episode, Kara shares how podcasters can use AI tools like ChatGPT to make content creation smoother and more engaging, from episode planning to crafting show notes that resonate with listeners. We'll cover ways to keep your podcast voice authentic even when using AI, and how to bring your audience back week after week. If you're ready to enhance your podcast content, this episode is filled with practical tips and insights you won't want to miss. Hello, Kara, and welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
So, Kara, can you start by telling us a bit about yourself and what you do as a copywriter and an AI expert in copywriting?
Sure. I mean, I'd never loved the word expert because I think we're kind of like just find our way into these things, don't we? But I've been copywriting for about 6 years for fitness businesses and really active go-getter kind of businesses. So I help people put words on a page that sell, basically. That's what copywriting is, moving people towards action and getting websites, sales page, emails, all that sort of thing. And then last year moved into AI as this kind of AI boom happened and realized that I could either bury my head in the sand, which I did for the first couple of months. I didn't want to know anything about it until one of my copywriting buddies said, no, this is actually really cool. Check it out. And I did. And then I launched my second business, AI Street, where we help people create content using AI tools.
Amazing. And how do you see AI tools impacting copywriting, and what can podcasters do to enhance their content using AI?
Well, AI's already had a massive impact on everything in marketing, for good and bad. In the hands of copywriters, it's an awesome tool because we understand how to talk to it and use it. Unfortunately, for a lot of people that I know that have lost clients due to these tools, clients have fired them and said, no, we'll just get ChatGPT to write it. Sometimes they do come back and they've had to go themselves and realized it's actually really crap. So they come with their tail between their legs and say, we actually really need you. But sometimes people are just happy with whatever they can churn out. So it has had a bit of a downside, and I think it will continue to do that. Some jobs may be lost, but on the flip side, it's going to create a whole heap of work and new avenues and jobs for people and speed up a lot of content creation. The thing that I love about it is that, I have days where I'm tired or I've got life stuff happening. And on those days, I can drop into a tool and it can just boost the creative vibes, get the brainstorming happening. I can get work done, even though I might not be feeling the creative kind of mojo. That's the hardest part being in a creative job, is that sometimes you're just not feeling it, and you can't do that when you've got a deadline. So AI tools are really handy for making sure you actually get things done that you need to.
Yeah, that's what I think too. When you're brainstorming, it's good for getting the backbone of what you want out there and giving you ideas, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And also like analysing the ideas you've got, because sometimes you're like, oh, this will be really cool. And then you create content for it and nobody resonates with it. Whereas now you can check in with your AI tools and say, hey, would my target audience actually be interested in this? And might, suggest a tweak or a better topic. So it's really handy for that too.
So what AI tool would you use for something like that then?
I use a mix. So I use ChatGPT. I've got the pro version for that. I also use Gemini because I like the different perspectives that the Google tool has. And then for researching, I use Perplexity because that one actually cites the resources. It's much more reliable. Tools like Gemini and ChatGPT, they're language learning models, so they're actually designed to create. The problem with that is they will make up facts. They completely can hallucinate and just make all sorts of garbage up. So people often rely on them and they're just spitting out complete bull dust. So we have to be careful of that. So I love Perplexity for actually citing sources, and I can go and check where it found that information from, and it's much more reliable.
Well, that's great. I've not heard of that one before. I'll put links in the show notes to everything Kara's recommending today too. So with ChatGPT, I only use the free version. What's the benefits of having the paid version?
In the beginning, it was that you could create agents. Now, you can do that on the free version as well, but it's limited. So I have a lot of agents, which is where you train your own kind of little version of ChatGPT, a little and you set it up to do specific tasks. So I have ones for generating images. I have ones for analyzing my offers. Every time I create a new offer in my business, I get it to go in and tell me whether it's going to be feasible, pricing it, all that sort of thing. I have ones for writing, content and broken down, ones for social media, blogs, posts, all that sort of stuff. And some people even go as far as to create, an agent for each client so that it's very tailored to that particular client's voice, branding, all that sort of thing.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know ChatGPT could find images.
Yeah, that it can generate, you can use DALL-E in the paid version. It can create images in there. So it's really handy. Yeah, particularly for me with AI Street, I can create some cool combination of robots with graffiti backgrounds and stuff like that, which are really hard to find.
Yeah, I've seen those actually. I didn't realise you got them through ChatGPT though.
Yeah.
Yep. So as someone who works with AI in copywriting, how do you maintain balance between leveraging technology for efficiency and preserving the creative human element in content you produce?
That one is a brilliant question. One of the things that is the hardest thing with AI tools is making sure you have a human in the loop, because a lot of people will just rely solely on these tools and just be like, great, it's, taking all these menial tasks off my plate. It's speeding up the time it takes me to get things done. But you must have a human in there checking everything and working through it. So like we were talking about, brainstorming is brilliant in terms of putting things in and getting topic ideas. I also then will use it to edit at the end, so refine and polish and check things over for flow. But I am always writing bits myself or tweaking or adjusting. I just never actually fully rely on that tool. So I think that's the biggest thing in finding that balance between these technologies, is not just going and handing everything off and going, oh, well, that's just done because AI is handling it for me. We need to still have our fingers on it as well.
Yeah, there's certain words I don't like that ChatGPT always uses, like dive in, delve into.
Yeah.
There's certain words that they often bring up are words that I would never use.
Unleash and, unlock, all those sorts of things. Yeah.
All the uns.
Yeah, and sea and ship analogies. It loves analogies, but especially anything kind of maritime for some reason. It's obsessed with that. I don't know who trained these models, but clearly they think that everybody's interested in those sorts of analogies.
And it always says, spill the tea. And I never say spill the tea. I say spill the beans. Just things like that.
Yeah, there's little quirks. And that's why creating your own agents can be really handy in there, because you can set it up and say, don't ever say these words, use these words instead. So you can be very specific. Otherwise, if you don't have an agent, you've got to put that in the prompt every single time to stop it doing that, which you can do. Like I have, whole documents which are very detailed prompts that I copy and paste across every time, because a lot of people think you just say, write me a social media post, and that's just not really how you do it. You've actually got to learn how to use the AI tool. And the biggest thing is prompt engineering, writing really detailed prompts. You start with a role. You are a copywriter. Today you're looking at hitting a deadline. And I often will give it, if I need it to be very strict on guidelines, I'll give it very clear parameters. For example, if you mention this word, which is a word I really don't like, it'll get $1,000 pay cut. And then, if you go and use analogies, you'll get a $4,000 pay cut. And it actually, uses these as rules and produces much better content because it's acting in this kind of role. It's quite fascinating to see.
I didn't realize it could do that.
Yeah. So it's giving a guideline so it will actually stick to what you're saying, because sometimes it gets a little bit lost or it hallucinates and forgets where it's at. If you're doing a really long thread too, you may need to copy and paste the original prompt back in further down just to keep it on track, because it does get a bit confused sometimes.
So with the paid for version of ChatGPT 2, what's the maximum word you can get? Or is there no maximum? Can it be as long as you like?
I don't believe there's a maximum. I think it's as long as you like, but it can, like I said, it can get a bit lost. So when I'm working on really big things, I will break it down into smaller chunks. I rarely give it the whole thing. Like I won't say, write a 1,000 word blog post in one go. I'll do sections. So I'll start with the header. Then we'll work on the intro. Then sometimes at the end, I'll copy and paste the whole thing in and be like, can you just review it and check it? But generally not generating a whole thing in one hit. It's not as great that way.
Yeah. Okay. Because I was just thinking of people with a podcast when they've got a transcript, say it's an episode that's an hour long and they wanted to turn it into show notes or a blog post or something. Copy and pasting that whole thing in wouldn't work. So yeah, they'd need to go in and break it down into chunks then to maybe get a few different blog posts out of it instead of just putting the whole thing in. You break the transcript down.
Yeah, that, or they could turn it into a PDF and then drop it into, because it's better at analyzing PDFs and summarizing it. So you could put a PDF in there and then ask it to pull out the topics from there. And then you could then either turn it into one blog post or multiple ones, or, 10 different social media posts. So it's kind of better if you do that rather than, copying and pasting a massive prompt in there.
Oh, that's interesting. Again, I didn't know you could attach PDFs to ChatGPT.
Yeah, you can do that, and it can access things like Google Sheets as well. There are different things you can pop in.
But this is on the paid for version, not the free version, is it?
Yeah, I can't remember. The thing is, AI moves so fast. So recently they've just done another update. I'm not sure if you can do it in the free version at the moment or not.
What are some common misconceptions about using AI in content creation, particularly in copywriting and podcasting?
I think that it should just be really easy. It's a pretty big misconception and myth that people think, because it is kind of marketed as being a fast, easy tool, which it is, that they just assume it should just do what they tell it to and that's it. So there is that kind of learning curve that I was talking about before with prompting. And the other thing is, it highlights what people really don't know about their brand. If you don't have a very clear brand voice or understand, how your brand messaging should sound, then that's often where people really go wrong with these tools, because they really haven't solidified, I want my brand to sound this way. For example, they might get on in their podcast and use a whole heap of words that they never put in their social media posts or emails, and, can create this kind of disconnect. So I think it's really important that we're aware of what our brand is about, how we talk in every platform, whether it's in the podcast, in the show notes, whatever it is, that it has the same kind of vibe, so that people don't get confused or feel like this just doesn't quite gel.
Yeah. Like you were saying earlier, it's putting that human touch in there.
Definitely, yeah.
And often I've had with ChatGPT, I know in my head what I want it to make, and I keep giving it prompts and it's just getting nowhere. And I keep saying, no, I don't want it like that. For example, I want it like this. And it's still coming up with something I don't want. I'm like, right, I give up. I've just got to use my own brain.
Yeah, sometimes you do just go and write it yourself. And I will find sometimes, particularly because I love writing, sometimes I'll get it to write a little bit like an introduction to something, and I'll be like, actually, no, I'm just going to write it myself. I've got a clearer picture of it in my head. But the other thing you can do is give it an example. That is the best way to show it what you want it to do is, say, whether it's a previous show notes, you could give it, say, write it in this kind of style, and you can be very instructive in what you're telling it to do. So you can say things like, use these particular words, use this sentence length, don't use slang or do use slang. Give it very descriptive parameters, I guess, for it to write with, and then it's going to produce a much better output. The only trick with putting examples in a prompt is sometimes it will very literally take that example, so everything it writes will relate about that. For example, if you've done a show on mindset and the next show is about money and you want it to write show notes for that, it might still keep talking about mindset because that's in the example. So you do have to really guide it on what you want it to take from the example and what it should ignore.
Yeah, it's like having an apprentice, isn't it?
And these tools are great for ironing out all these kinks before you go and delegate. Like I say to people, you might not be able to afford a social media manager now, but at some point you might. You might not just want to not deal with it at all, even with AI tools. So it's really handy for picking up where things just aren't quite right and getting those processes really smoothed out. So then when you are big enough to offload this stuff, you can just hand it over and they say, this is what we do and this is how we do it.
Yeah, it's good for the interim, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And can you share any examples of how AI has helped you enhance the creative process in your copywriting work, and how similar techniques could be applied for podcasting?
Definitely. I mean, things like naming episodes or naming podcasts, names can be really tricky to come up with. And I feel like names are something that you kind of just get a feel for, but they don't always drop in your lap. As much as us copywriters are great with words, sometimes you're fiddling around with a million ideas and you just never quite get the right one. So it can be really awesome. And it's pretty rare that I will put something, a prompt into an AI tool and it'll give me the exact name that I want. Usually it'll spit something out and I'll combine it with a name I've already got. So I find it's really good for enhancing creativity that way. It's kind of just giving you more ideas, I guess. And yeah, in different ways of phrasing things is probably the other option, because often we get stuck in saying things the same way. But then the pitfall of that is that all these AI tools are just scraping human content. So they're only as good as what we put out there. And if everyone keeps using them, we do kind of have this risk of cannibalization and everything's going to sound same. So it is kind of a catch-22 in terms of it's really helpful for boosting creativity, but we also need to flex our own kind of creative muscle as well.
Yeah, a pet hate of mine with ChatGPT and titles is they always put the colon in, which I hate.
Yes.
Whenever I'm looking for titles for episodes, I always write, please don't put a colon in the title. I hate colons. And then I have to put in brackets the little dots.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know why it does that, because it's a very odd way. Like a lot of copywriters would never use those. You'd usually use your short and punchy header and then a longer subheader underneath, but not with a colon. So I don't know why it's obsessed with them. Whoever trained it obviously trained it that way. But it's one of my pet peeves as well.
Yeah. And even when you ask it not to do it, it's still, if I ask to give 10 titles, no colon, guaranteed there'll still be 2 in there with a colon.
Yes. I just don't think you can quite give it up completely.
I know, it's funny. How do you ensure that copy retains a unique human voice when incorporating AI tools into your workflow?
I think the biggest tip with this one is reading it out loud. A lot of people will just write something or get their AI tool to write something and then just publish it and never really check how it sounds. So I always tell my clients, whether it's the first draft I've sent to them or they're writing for themselves, just sit down and read it out loud. And it's a really easy way to catch where things sound a bit clunky or you've repeated words or ideas and things like that. So it's really handy to make sure it actually sounds quite human. The other thing is we should be writing for a 12-year-old to understand it. And often these AI tools can get a little bit flowery or a bit kind of corporate with their language. So I instruct it to write for a 12-year-old to understand it and use the simplest language possible. So that's something you can put in the prompt, but also just keep in mind that everything we write in marketing and podcasting needs to be as absorbable as possible. Like, our brains only want to use the minimal calories and just get the message as fast as possible. Even if you're podcasting to the most, high IQ people on the planet, it doesn't matter. In the moment that they're listening to that podcast, they're not wanting to strain their brain. They just want to get the message you're trying to get across as quickly and easily as possible. So when we can simplify words, find better alternatives, then that makes a big difference in keeping it more human.
Yeah, I've noticed that with podcasting, like when you write a script for a podcast, it's so important to read it out loud because what you read in your head sounds good, but as soon as it comes out of your mouth, it doesn't sound right. Like for me, I struggle with certain words, which I can read fine, but it's even the word like strategies. I sometimes stumble saying that. So when I say it in a podcast episode, when I'm doing solo episodes, I say it over and over again because it doesn't work in my mouth. There's certain words I stumble over, which I have to change when I'm actually recording the episode.
Yeah, and that's really important to catch those words. And I think we've all got those. I had that with the word brewery. My husband always laughs that I just cannot say that word. So you just hate it then. I cannot pronounce the R's for some reason. My mouth doesn't like that one. And I think everyone's got a particular word that they stumble on or don't like. And it's really obvious then that you're using an AI tool if a lot of the words, you sound like you're almost reading them and not able to say them. So yeah, that's definitely a really good way of catching those tricky words out.
Yeah, I think mine's my London accent because we're not very good at pronouncing our T's. So I'd normally say strategy, but I know I must pronounce my T's strategy.
I like it either way.
Do you think there's a risk of AI tools making content too formulaic? And how can we avoid this while still benefiting from AI?
Definitely. Unfortunately, AI tools, particularly like ChatGPT, can get very prescriptive. The best thing is giving it very detailed information and writing something without an AI tool and making sure those examples are put in there. So when you're prompting it, that helps it to write in a more human way. There are some other tools like Claude, which I find is probably better in terms of copywriting and the output that it has. But the biggest thing is always coming back to our own way of phrasing things and never just fully relying on it and going, hey, I wouldn't necessarily say it that way and don't just trust in the AI tool just because Chatty said it doesn't mean it's great. We need to check in and go, does this actually sound like me? Does it sound like my brand? Is this how I want to express myself? That makes a massive difference when we, check in and think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I liked your idea earlier of putting in the prompt to say it as if a 12-year-old was reading it too. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, it just makes the language that bit different.
For those who are new to using AI in content creation, what would you suggest as a starting point to keep the balance between creativity and technology?
I would probably start with a basic tool like Gemini. You don't even have to go into ChatGPT. Gemini, you can just literally Google Gemini. It's really easy. And pop in there with whatever content you're struggling with at the moment the most, really. So whether that's social media post, podcast show notes, blog posts, emails, whatever it is, and just give it a bit of a guide and say, look, this is the last thing that I wrote. I really struggle to either come up with the ideas or put words on paper, and ask it for some guidance. It's actually really helpful with these sorts of things. I even created an AI agent in ChatGPT that's like a life coach for me. So when I'm like, I don't know what to do about this, I can ask it questions. So there's some pretty cool things you can do and have conversations with you. It's almost like your business buddy that you've never had. You don't always be in your friend's chat asking questions and bothering people, or maybe you've got a copywriter or a web designer or a podcast manager, but you don't always want to be at them with every little question. So these AI tools are really handy for that, particularly if you're doing research. Like I say before, Perplexity is really awesome for researching topics, is really handy for that.
What's the difference between Gemini and ChatGPT?
They're basically the same. You can't build agents in Gemini. So Gemini is Google's version of ChatGPT. So they're just kind of competing on it. And Claude is the same. It's similar to their language learning models. So it's the same as ChatGPT, but Claude is mainly for writing. ChatGPT can do lots of different things. It's kind of built around all different purposes. Perplexity is more for research. There's also one called Jasper, which again is like Claude and mostly for writing, really good at doing on-brand voice, keeping that tone of voice, writing style, really top quality content. So it just depends on what you're looking for from your tool. ChatGPT is the one everyone's talked about, I think, because it flexes the most in different areas. So it's more versatile, but it really just depends on the purpose you've got for it.
Wow, there's loads out there. I didn't even know all these existed.
Yeah, and there's hundreds more, but most of them are just duplicates.
So how do you see the role of AI evolving in creative fields like copywriting and podcasting? And what should creators be aware of as they consider incorporating AI into their processes?
It's definitely going to make a big difference in the way that we create content and the way we write and generate images and things like that. The biggest thing we need to be aware of is the ethical side of it and making sure we are changing it enough. I never write something fully from AI and then publish it like that, not just because of quality, but also because that is scraping other people's content. And I would never want to produce something that's just basically copied off theirs. So it's really important that we're aware of that fact and make sure if we're generating images, for our podcast cover or things like that, that we make it different enough that it's our own kind of thing. And we consider that we want to have the awareness of those ethics, but it's also then makes your brand stand out more because there's that big risk of everything becoming very vanilla and blending in. I'm already seeing it a lot from people that are very obviously using AI tools and not reading it, checking it, not prompting it properly. They're all starting to sound a bit same. So there is this big risk that we are all just going to kind of become this factory of content. And we don't want to do that. We want to carve out our little space on the internet and say, this is us, on Spotify and things like that. Come check us out. This is what we're about. And we're different because of X, Y, Z. And that needs to show in every piece of content that we produce.
Yeah, it's like when you ask ChatGPT to help you write a script for your podcast episodes. It's okay to get the bones of it, but it's always good to put your own insights and your own stories in there. So it's good for just laying out the foundations and then putting your own thoughts and ideas and stories in there to make it more about yourself. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. And I love that you put stories in there because storytelling is one of the most powerful marketing tools, talking about how your favorite barista messed up your coffee and it was really frustrating, and then relating that to a client's frustration. These sorts of stories are amazing at really relating to people, building emotion, tapping into their heart and their head at the same time. And AI tools just are not there yet. They can write stories, but it's never going to have that same personal feel, and it's never going to be expressed in the way that you would write it. So definitely adding those personal stories in is super important.
Yeah, totally. And also because there's so many podcasts out there at the moment around the same sort of topics. So you've got the competition there, and that's where you can stand out by putting your own stories in there.
Well, that's right. You can ask the AI tool, well, what would be, everyone else is talking about this. I want to talk about this topic. What would be a different angle for it? But then to really flesh that out and really, tap into that, you could put your own spin on it, add your own little stories in there, your little ways of expressing yourself. and these kind of points is which people will be really attracted to and enjoy listening to your podcast a lot more.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, could you tell us where we can connect with you online and learn more about your work?
Sure, you can go to my website, karastokescopywriter.com, or on Instagram is where I usually hang out, so Kara Stokes Copy Coach. They can come and have a look at my content tips. I often do like little Canva hacks in there. I also run events for Perth business owners where we create content, take reels and videos and have a whole heap of fun and network to try and just bring your fun back, because this is the thing, content creation, whether it's podcasts or whatever it is, can feel like a bit of a burden sometimes, even though it's a labor of love. There's so much involved in it. So I like to bring that element of fun and play back to these sorts of things. So yeah, they can pop over there and check me out.
I've been on one of Kara's, what's it called?
Snap, Talk, Walk.
Yeah, and they're so much fun. So I recommend them if you're Perth-based.
Yeah, definitely a lot of fun and an easy way to get heaps and heaps of content. You walk away with your phone loaded with photos and videos.
So thanks very much, Kara. This was great. I'm going to look up all these AI tools myself and see which ones I fancy using.
Yeah, awesome. That's the thing. You just got to test them out. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining me and Kara as we shared insights into AI, copywriting, and finding that creative balance. Kara offered some real gems about weaving your unique voice into every piece of content, and I couldn't agree more. I've personally found that AI can be a great time saver, especially when brainstorming. But as Kara highlighted, it's essential to keep that personal touch. Since recording this episode, I upgraded to the paid version of ChatGPT, which does allow me to paste longer podcast transcripts, which is really handy for bigger episodes. I'm still exploring all the features, but so far I've been able to work with entire episodes up to an hour long. So if you've been curious about giving it a try, it could be a great tool for you and your podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review and I'll catch you next time. If you found value in this podcast, please leave a 5-star rating, and a review would be even better. Your support shows that this is a good show, which will attract high-profile guests and in turn deliver greater value to you. This podcast is produced and edited by me. Don't waste your time on editing. Let me help you with your podcast. Check out the links in the show notes to get in touch.